Good afternoon. If I could, I'd like to just begin by saying a couple of thank yous to people that made the successful prosecution of this case possible. Ms. Eve Dempscher, who is a neighbor of the Velardos, was the first victim in this case of the defendant. Her house was burglarized on April the 6th. It was the connection to Ms. Dempscher's burglary that was what allowed the police to focus in on Mr. Tomaszewski as the person responsible for the Velardo homicide. I'm honored also to be joined besides Ms. Dempscher by members of the Velardo family, Andy and Katie, which are the two surviving children of Dick and Jody, as well as Lindsay Velardo, Andy's wife, are here. These individuals have shown extraordinary courage in dealing with the circumstances surrounding this homicide. I'm sure you were struck with the emotion that we listened to in the 911 call in the courtroom earlier today. One can only imagine that the discovery of this murder came on Mother's Day, as Jody and Dick were anticipated to be meeting their children for Mother's Day brunch, wanted to have their children go and discover that both their mother and their father had been murdered in the evening hours prior to the brunch that they scheduled for Mother's Day. I'd also like to congratulate the Montgomery County Police. I will tell you, the men and women, the people who live in this county should be very proud of the work that was done by the Montgomery County Police Department in this case. To have a case that was a whodunit on a Sunday, and to have an apprehension by a Friday that coordinated 6 different police departments 3,000 miles away, including both federal and state agencies that cooperated in this investigation, is an extraordinary piece of police work. And I think every police detective and member, man and woman of the police department that participated in this case deserves the thanks of everybody in this community. I'm also honored to recognize 2 of my partners here. Look, you don't do these things by yourself. And former retired Judge Mike Alcho is now special counsel to the state's attorney, and Assistant State's Attorney Peter Larson are very much responsible for what happened today and the preparations they put into this case, and I want to thank both of them for the wonderful work that they did. Scott Tomaszewski is 32 years old. Minor criminal record, but today he pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. The victims in those cases were Dick and Jody Velardo. In the case of Mr. Velardo, the state is seeking a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. That would mean that the defendant in this case will die in jail. That is the maximum sentence allowed by law in Maryland. We do not have a death penalty. Whether or not the defendant receives life without the possibility of parole is ultimately within the discretion of Judge John Debelius, who is the chief judge of this circuit, and we will be having a sentencing before Judge Debelius, which is anticipated to last several hours on November the 15th, beginning at 1:30 in the afternoon. Dick and Julianne Velardo were absolutely wonderful people. I think we look around a packed courtroom for a plea today, because these were beloved people who gave back to their community every day. And the evening before they were murdered, they had gone out with members of their gardening club to have dinner. These were the kind of people you wanted as your neighbors. This attack could not have been more sad. The crime scene, as you read it, tells us, I believe irrefutably, that Mr. Velardo was attacked in his own bed. Probably did not even know what was happening to him, because the crime scene suggests that he stumbled from his bed, probably left by the defendant for dead, fell into his own bathroom trying to figure out what in God's name has happened to him. The motive appears to have been robbery, and there were things taken in this case. But the attack seems to have preceded the taking of any objects. As you listened in court today, you found out that this was not a robbery gone bad, but this was a calculated act where a man came armed with multiple knives, one that resembles a small machete, He came armed with a mask to hide his identity. These people had been neighbors for decades. This was a man who pre-calculated his break-in by doing Google searches all day long the day before the murder. How do you break into a window? How do you cut a screen? How do you get in using a credit card into a house? That's how he prepared for his attacks on the Velardos. And then you also heard about how he tried to cover his tracks by sending feigned notes over the internet to people back here about how sorry he felt for his neighbors and how horrific it was and how bumbling the police were in their efforts to try to find out who was responsible for this crime. Well, they found exactly how bumbling the Montgomery County Police were when they put cuffs on him 5 days later in Alaska. Perhaps one of the facts that was least known about this case was during the course of the investigation we found this out. We had reason based on an iPhone photograph that showed a machete about this large laying on a bed next to the defendant in his bedroom. When we did the first search of his house, we did not find that knife. We went armed with a second search warrant to go back to try to find the knife we knew existed and knew was possessed by the defendant. And based on the catastrophic nature of the injuries to the victims in this case, we knew that there was another knife of some monumental proportion. When we went back on that second search warrant, we found out that that knife had been in the house, and it had been found. It had been found by the defendant's mother, Jeanette. She had found it along with some of the proceeds from the burglary, and she had taken the knife and the proceeds from the burglary and gone to the waste transfer station. She went to the county dump, and she threw it away. The police, again, continuing their efforts to close this case, tried to find out if there were any way to find those items. Those items were not retrievable at the county dump. And there actually are even videos that are made at the county waste transfer station. But those videos, because of the loop, we missed her being shown throwing those items away by 1 day. We wanted that testimony, and once we found out that the defendant's mother had done that to hide her son's complicity in this crime, we wanted her testimony. She agreed to testify in this matter because, and the Velardos knew this, we wanted to make sure that we held Scott responsible for the murder. And one of the ways in which we built the case against him was enlisting his own mother potentially to testify against him about finding those items and disposing of those items after she found them in the family home. One of the outstanding members of the Velardo family is going to speak now for a second. Andy Velardo, and I think he's going to actually also mention some of the thoughts of his sister Katie. So with that, I'm going to ask Andy if he'd step forward.
I really just wanted to get up here to say something from the Velardo family and all of our extended family that was here to help us support this and really be one of the only reasons we've been able to survive this 17-month nightmare perpetrated by a monster that we've known for most of our lives. And I just want to thank John McCarthy and Mike Laudio and Peter Larson and the entire state's attorney team. The job that they did to keep us informed and to bring us to today and to get today executed was a monstrous step for all of us here to hope that we can continue to move on. I want to thank the Montgomery County Police Department. Their efforts have been unbelievable. Detective Fernando Carbajal, Sergeant Larry Geary's Keyless team, for them to survive across country in a matter of days to pull him off a boat that he got onto hours after committing this crime was something you read about in the movie. And for that to be real life was something that was difficult for us to comprehend. But in the couple days after the tragedy, for us to sit not knowing where to go or what to do, and for them to take 5 days to bring us the person that did it, was something that, I don't have words to thank them, and the job that the whole police department did, and I will be forever indebted to them, as well as my whole family. And I really want to thank all of our friends and family that are here Thank you so much. The only reason that I can get up here and talk is because I have all these people standing behind me, my sister, my wife, all of our friends, my 2 little ones at home. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll take a couple of questions if anybody's got some questions for us.
Bruce LeShan, Channel 9.
So, I don't know how much of this you can get into looking forward. You spoke a little bit to this question. I mean, burglary is one thing, but the horror of this crime, what could explain that?
I don't think there's any rational explanation for the conduct of the defendant in this case. We know that because he had broken into an unoccupied home of his neighbor, Mr. Dempscher, he had stolen things from his own neighbors before. And obviously his victims lived in relatively close proximity to him, but he knew these people. I know from talking to the Velardo children, when they were younger, they played with this kid. They were in and out of each other's houses. They knew each other, which makes it almost more unfathomable to try to figure out why this would have happened. And again, I think the crime scene seems to suggest, even though he did steal things, even though I think the motive may have been robbery, it does seem to suggest that the attack preceded the taking of anything. Mr. Velardo was in his bed. It's almost irrefutable. There was massive blood loss in that particular location. This was a man in his nightclothes sleeping in his bed with his wife who had just come back from having dinner with people from the garden party. There's no rational explanation for this, but there was an enormous amount of planning. Look, he was texting to an old girlfriend, said he had some work to do and was looking for a hockey mask. I can only assume that he needed the hockey mask to hide his identity, because we know that he was masked on this particular occasion, because we have that mask. It was not a hockey mask.
Can I just ask a follow-up
Sure.
on that? He had previously suggested his attorney that he was not criminally responsible because of mental illness. His lawyer just said that he believes that he has mental illness, but not enough to qualify to be not criminally responsible, and he points back to this swimming pool injury.
Well, let me say, I think the attorney for the defendant in this case did an extraordinary job exploring the possibility of an insanity defense. This man was examined by an independent doctor, Christian Tellefson, a doctor that I knew, who found him criminally responsible. He was then examined by a second doctor who found him criminally responsible. He was examined by the state doctors at Clifton D. Perkins who found him criminally responsible. He was examined by yet another doctor out in Columbia last week who found him criminally responsible. He had a neurologist look at brain images to see whether or not there was any, as a result of the swimming incident that you just referred to in your question, whether there was any neurological damage to his brain. There was absolutely none. Now, again, there maybe he suffers from some depression, as most inmates do, but there is no major mental illness here that would give rise to a psychiatric defense. It was fully explored, and there was not a single doctor that was, look at what he did. I mean, this is look at what he did the day before. How do you say that somebody's insane when they spend the entire day before trying to figure out how to break into a house, arming themselves, masking themselves, and then trying to cover up the crime with false leads and false kinds of things, false sympathy kinds of notes he sends to the family. Look, this was cold and it was calculated both before and after the offense. I think that anybody who came in and tried to make this an insanity case would have been laughed out of court.
Got Paul Wagner with Fox 5.
John, do you have evidence of, or can you prove that Mrs. Tomaszewski knew what she was doing when she threw away those items, and would she face any charges?
Well, the answer to the last part of the question is, we've interviewed her. She indicated she didn't want the items in her house. That's what she told us. I think, my own personal opinion, she knew exactly what it was she found, and she got rid of it because she knew that it would implicate her son in this killing. Is she going to face charges? The answer to that is no. I made a calculation that it was more important to make sure that Scott was held responsible for the murder, and once I found out his mother was implicated, I made two calculations. I wanted to make the case as strong as I could against Scott, and I thought the specter of having to potentially have your mother testify against you might be a motivation that would make him want to plead guilty.
And secondly, wasn't there a detective, a retired detective, that came to you and or the police and said, that you should take a look at Tomaszewski?
Yeah, yes. Years ago, there had been an incident, and it did not involve this brother. It was the other brother. The other Tomaszewski boy had been involved in an incident at the house where he took one of the family cars when he was supposed to be watching the house. And yes, the retired detective called us, and that was a tip that brought the Tomaszewski name into it. But the key thing really was the pawning of Mrs. Dempster's high school ring. But we did have that tip, and we are very thankful that that detective did call us, because it gave us a reason to focus in on these individuals from the very beginning. But again, it was the ring that was really the linchpin.
We have a question from Derek Ward, NBC4.
In that case, did this Tomaszewski, did he testify or turn evidence against his brother?
No, that case never went to court. That was a matter this was a matter about house sitting and whether somebody who violated sort of the terms of house sitting a house. The Tomaszewski boy was doing house sitting for your mom. What?
Yeah, I chose that.
But the Velardo family decided, Dick Velardo and Jody, kind of people, they saw it as a neighborhood matter. They handled it privately between themselves and the Tomaszewski mom and dad, but that was decades ago. Look, we've looked at that. Did we think, my God, could that event 20 years ago, which was handled informally between neighbors, been the motivation for this? Certainly we've given that a thought. It just doesn't make sense because it's even a different brother, but we did give thought to it.
This is one of the most brutal cases that we've seen that you guys have prosecuted. Obviously, the pictures that were up there were not easy for their friends and their family to see, I can't imagine. From a prosecutorial standpoint, what was the strategy in showing those to show the judge? Or can you explain why you were showing the evidence?
If you looked at the layout of this house, this crime scene really traversed from the, if you consider that this is a rambler, he broke in on one side of the first level of the house into the den, and the bedroom is at the opposite end. If you believe, as we do, that the attack began in the bedroom, this was not an isolated area where somebody was slain in a kitchen or bed. This attack occurred literally throughout the entire first floor. There was nowhere you could walk in this house, whether it was in the kitchen or in the bathroom or in the closet or in the bedroom. There's nowhere you could walk in this house and not see evidence of the attack. It literally went from one end of the house to the other. And again, one of the things that I don't know that I gave enough credit to Mr. Velardo. Look, I firmly believe, and I think all of us do that know this case, the last act on earth that Mr. Richard Velardo was engaged in, I firmly believe was his last-ditch effort to try to save his wife. If you look at the crime scene and you look at the blood spatter and you look at the pattern, the last thing that this man, Dick Velardo, did was try to go to where he thought his wife was. I'm sure there was screaming, I'm sure there was noises. He ran towards the danger rather than away from it because he was attempting to save the woman that he loved.